Hi there, it's Pastor Veronica Smith here with a morning devotion for you. We are continuing our look at Barbara Brown Taylor's When God is Silent. And I've got my copy right here. So here it is. This is When God is Silent, Barbara Brown Taylor. And it is available through Cloister Publishing. I do know that it is still available to get your own copy of this book. So I would love to encourage you, just like I did with our last devotional book, to get yourself a copy of this book. It's amazing. This is actually my second copy because my first copy was used so much that it was starting to fall apart. So I would love for you to get yourself a copy. So I am sorry we're starting a little bit late today. Many of you know that I have a 4-year-old at home, and we had a little potty trouble this morning that apparently mom was the only one who could help with. So, and of course that happened at 11:27. So I'm sorry about getting in a little bit late today, but I promise you it's worth it because this book is worth it. If you haven't joined me for any of our Wednesday devotions, for When God is Silent, that is okay because each one of the excerpts that I read stands alone. And that's sort of the beautiful part about this because Barbara Brown Taylor's book is actually made up of sermons. It's a sermon series that she did at Yale. So that's great because some of the excerpts kind of stand alone for discussion. So I do want to give Mary a shout out for joining us today. I hope that means that John is there with her too. But again, as always, we don't read cover to cover. We read sections and discuss because I want you to get yourselves a copy of this book. Support the author and the publishing companies as best you can. And I'm not sure if it's available on digital for those of you who have things like Kindles where you read things. I'm an old school girl. I like to hear the sound of the pages and smell the fresh book. So I don't use the digital reading very much. But we're looking at the first section of this book. We're looking at the section called Famine, and what I'm really kind of is fun about this particular chapter is it refers to some things that maybe aren't as common memory today as they used to be, but are some things that were in media that you were probably aware of. And so some of what I remind people about this book is that it was written in the late 90s. And so some of the things might be a little timely. There's a reference later on that always makes people chuckle because it talks about pagers, and I know very few people have pagers anymore. And so there are a few older references here, but I promise you that these are ones that you guys are going to know. So all that being said, we are going to read a little section of Famine. And if you happen to have a copy of the book at home, I'm going to be reading from pages 12, 13, and 14 and 15. We're actually going to be uh, um, stopping partway through page 15. So here we go. When God is Silent by Barbara Brown Taylor. A third assault on the nobility of language is the sheer proliferation of words with which most of us are faced each day. Not counting taxonomic lists of species, it is estimated that the English language contains some 600,000 words. By comparison, Elizabethan English had about 150,000. Ooh, that's a big difference. And the King James Version of the Bible contains only 6,000. We have words for things that were unknown a century ago. Bytes, quarks, bazookas, and we have words that have emerged from specialized disciplines. Psychotherapy, biotechnology, econometrics. Predictably, perhaps, our care for words has declined as their number has increased. Children who shop at Toys R Us and teenagers for whom the height of cool speech is that of their favorite rap artist, do not understand what the fuss is all about when their teachers point out that quick is not spelled Quik. The, the democratization of language, there's a new word for you, has had the effect of making good grammar sound fussy, and the use of any word over 3 syllables a sure sign of the elite. And yet the words keep coming at us through an ever-expanding variety of media. So many words that some days it sounds as if we live our lives against a wall of constant noise. For some people, it is company. I know one man who keeps a television set going in every room of his house because it helps him feel less lonely. For other people, noise is a weapon. Do you remember how the FBI broadcast Nancy Sinatra's "These Boots Are Made for Walkin'" into the Branch Davidian compound in Waco in hopes of driving cult members out? I don't remember that at all. For other people, noise is frankly an addiction. The author of a recent essay in the New York Times Magazine, Tom Rice, confessed that he once spent every waking hour with a Walkman headset plugged in his ears, listening to music or, more often, to educational tapes. He had a brown suede pouch for the machine that he wore around his waist. "Every morning I'd strap it on like a gunfighter's belt," he said, "low on my hip, ready to face off against my enemies, the potentially empty minutes of the day." Finally convinced that his dependence was beginning to affect his relationships, he unplugged. While he still jumps at sudden noises and often finds himself at a loss for words, he is committed to doing without his Walkman one day at a time. The most unfortunate side effect of all the noise is that many of us have become hard of hearing. We learn to filter out words that are not necessary to our lives, the same way we learn to sleep in a house near railroad tracks. Our brains protect us from the daily barrage of words by increasing our resistance to them. Recent studies show that most people recall only about 25% of what they've heard in the past few days. We do not listen well, and at least part of it is because we can listen much faster than most people can talk. While most human beings speak at a rate of 170 to 150 words a minute, we can process more than 500 words a minute, which makes it hard for us to stay tuned to prolonged communication, especially if the speaker is halting or dull. We tend to use the lag time in a conversation to compose our own responses, which makes us even poorer listeners. Kathy Thompson, who teaches courses on conversation at Alverno College in Milwaukee, was quoted in a recent article by Cynthia Crossan in the Wall Street Journal as saying that we have become a nation of interrupters. At our house, Thompson says, we warn new friends to be careful because we treat conversation like a competitive sport. The first one to take a breath is considered the listener. Psychotherapists, call-in radio hosts, and clergy all reap the benefits of this whirlwind. We are paid to listen, and people who cannot make themselves heard anywhere else in the world line up to talk to us. They may also go online, hunting chat rooms where they can log on or log off at will. All right, well, I'm going to end there, even though there is some really amazing stuff coming up. But I want to reread to you a section, and I'm actually marking it off because I want to make sure that you hear this one, and it's because it just really, I think it, no pun intended, it speaks volumes. The most unfortunate side effect of all the noise is that many of us have become hard of hearing. We learn to filter out words that are not necessary to our lives, the same way we learn to sleep in a house near railroad tracks. Our brains protect us from the daily barrage of words by increasing our resistance to them. Well, my grandparents lived in a house right next to train tracks. My grandfather worked on the railroad, and many of his brothers did as well. And so the railroad was part of our upbringing. In fact, I went to Brunswick Middle School and Brunswick High School, and we were the railroaders. So I'm very familiar with that idea of sleeping next to the train tracks and having no trouble. It certainly didn't keep us up at night. Anytime I spent the night there, I don't remember sleepless nights because of trains. And my grandma and grandpa didn't have any trouble sleeping because of it either. So there is something to be said for that. But I wonder if we think about that in terms of conversation. And I was actually thinking that I imagine that Barbara Brown Taylor today, if I could talk to her today and say, hey, we did a devotion about your book, but I would love for you to do a modern update. that I was thinking about how we are good at decreasing the words that we use, and thinking about social media. Um, Sorry, we all can hear my dog barking. He's using his words right now to tell us that we're getting a package, or someone just walked down the street, or a leaf blew with the wind. But I was thinking about the way that we communicate today. Some of the most popular forms of communication today are what? Well, we use social media like we're using now, Facebook. Later, this video will go up on YouTube, and also on our church website. But we communicate via email, text messages, other forms of social media like Twitter and Snapchat. And TikTok is one that I've recently become familiar with. That it's little short videos. And what do we notice about some of the most popular forms of social media today? How brief they are, how short they are. I believe Twitter messages have to be less than 140 characters. That's characters, not words, but characters. So that's each individual letter, and then if you use any punctuation or spaces, that goes towards that character count. 140 characters, it isn't much. That's very short. Even on social media, we have learned, people who have studied social media and marketing know that some of the best, most popular commercials and advertisements, and ways for businesses to attract customers is by keeping their messages short. That the average attention span of a person is like less than 10 minutes. And I've even learned that too. I was taught in seminary that if you preach for longer than 15 minutes, people were only going to remember a third of what you say. And I put a lot of effort in my sermons, and I want you to remember more than a third of what I say. So we still continue to be that way, that brief messages seem to be what we're used to. If you had to take, let's think of a classic novel. What's a really classic novel? Oh, one of my favorite classic novels. I love, oh man, I'm sort of tied here. I really like Jane Eyre. That's one of my favorites. I love Jane Eyre. Maybe that's just a girl thing, I don't know. But I love Jane Eyre. And I was thinking, if you had to take the novel Jane Eyre and shrink it down to 140 characters, I mean, why would I even bother? I think about the one scene where Jane runs away, where she finds out that everything's a lie and there's a woman hidden in the attic. And if I'm ruining this story for you, then I'm very sorry, because it's a great novel and you should read it. But when Jane goes out into the Scottish moors to grieve the loss of her love, and what her future was going to be and everything else, when that happens, and she's wandering through and talks about the dampness and the harshness and her heart breaking and all this kind of stuff, and how she feels like the moors, cold and wet, and without joy or love, and I think about what a beautiful, despite it being sad and associated with grief, what a beautiful piece of literature that section is, because anyone who's ever felt heartbreak has felt like that, even when the teenage heartbreak, right? Because everything's relative. I know I've had my heart broken before, and I know what it felt like to be wandering those moors, lost and alone and afraid. And in 140 characters, you probably have to cut that entirely out, and it would make Jane's journey less significant to remove that part of it. I can't imagine trying to make Jane Eyre last 140 characters. That's just insane. Or Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare, or if you're into Michael Crichton, trying to make Jurassic Park 140 characters, or Stephen King's The Stand. And of course, these are all books that I like and enjoy and have read, and you may have your own. So think about some of your favorite novels, what it would be like to be told, all right, well, that novel needs to take less than 15 minutes to read, or it has to be 140 characters, or it has to be a 60-second video. You have to tell that whole story. It's a shame that we have moved that way, that we get to this point where we have such an oversaturation of words that we're watering down our experience of language. And that's really sad. And I think we can all say that that's true in a lot of ways. And it's something that I think that we need to work on. And yet, we also have to acknowledge that because that's the way our culture and society continues to be and move, and I'm sure that the number of words we have in our language is significantly more than what she mentioned in 1997, that if we know that and we acknowledge that that is people's experience of words and language, that we have to be prepared to change the way we talk about our faith and our beliefs and how we talk about God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. That we can't give a 45-minute lecture on how God works through us to care for the kingdom to someone, because they're likely not going to have that attention span. They may, and sometimes they do, and those conversations do happen, but we have to be aware that the average person isn't going to be receptive to that. And I think that's really fascinating. And it's one of the reasons why, when I was being trained as a redeveloper, that we talked about as leaders how to train our congregations to give elevator speeches about our churches. And when they first raised that to our attention, I'm like, "What are you talking about, elevator speech?" And what we were being taught was that when someone is going to say why they go to the church that they go to, they need to be prepared to give a speech that would last about as long as an elevator ride would last. Now, I'm not talking, when we were talking about that, a few people said, like New York City skyscraper elevator ride, or like local hospital with 5 or 6 floors ride. And they said local hospital 5 or 6 floors ride, because there are buildings with hundreds of stories, and that would give you a very long elevator ride. But the point is that we should be able to tell people in less than 5 minutes why we go to our church and what we like about it. And the fact of the matter is most of us probably can't do that without spending some time thinking about it and considering it. So I like that Barbara Brown Taylor brings this up, because she makes me think about language and words, and about the fact that, even though this was written, a while back, that that it still works. This is something that we still have to think about. So I don't really want to give you homework, but I sort of do, because I would just be fascinated. So whether you're watching this now live, or whether you are watching this previously recorded a couple of hours from now, or a few days from now on YouTube or on our website, whenever you're watching this, I want you, whether Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Killeen, Texas is your church, or maybe you attend another church, or maybe you're just considering our church, and you attend a different church or don't attend a church right now, but to think about your church, wherever that is, and think about what your elevator speech would be about your church. What would you say if you were wearing a t-shirt with your church's name on it? Let's say I was wearing a t-shirt and it said Emmanuel Lutheran Church. And they said, "Oh, Emmanuel Lutheran Church. I've never heard of it." What would you say? It's like, "Oh, it's a great church. I really enjoy going there." That's cool. I think Topsy Drive-Through Animal Ranch is a great place too, and I enjoy going there, but it's not a church. You can see why it matters, right? Just saying it's great, I like it, is not enough to invite people to want to learn more and know more, because one of the points of that elevator speech, of the keeping things short and having those 140 characters, is because you want people to be encouraged to go beyond that. You want to tell them the elevator speech so that they'll want to go to the website or call the church office or whatever it is, find your church on Facebook and learn more than that 5-minute speech. Or they'll want to follow you off the elevator. Now, of course, we know we're not being literal about the elevator thing. It could be that you're waiting in line um, at the grocery store, or you're at the dentist office in the waiting room, and somebody says, looks over, and you're holding a newsletter that says Emmanuel Lutheran Church, and they say, "Oh, do you go there? Do you go to church there? I'm new to the area. I don't really know. I've been kind of looking for a church." And you can go, "Oh yeah, I do go there. We're right in Killeen, and have a great facility that's accessible, and we offer a whole lot. And right now we're our campus is closed because of coronavirus, but our church is not closed. We have all kinds of things available during the week. You should really check us out on Facebook and maybe join us for devotions. But mostly, I just love it because the community feels like family to me, and I like feeling a part of God's family and having lots of siblings in Christ. There you go. Now, I don't want you to copy me and know that that wasn't very perfect. That was as good as I could get, sort of extemporaneously. But I'd love for you to think about that. What would your less than 5 minute elevator speech be about why your church? What would you say to someone to draw them in and be interested in more than the first 140 characters? Think about the words you use and how valuable each and every word is when we don't have the opportunity to say a whole lot of words. I love that Barbara Brown Taylor reminds me of that in her series of sermons, that she reminds me to consider and think about the words I say and how valuable they can be, and how much weight words can carry when we don't get the opportunity to say a whole lot of them. So think about the words you say when you share about your faith journey, share about your beliefs, share about how much you love God and what it's like to serve God in the world, and about your church, the place where you feel most at home on your faith journey. Consider your words and how much power they hold, even when you don't say many words at all. Well, friends, I hope you will join me at one of our devotions. We gather every Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. or 6:45 p.m. to read through some excerpts, to talk about them, and to dig deeper into what they mean. And our devotions, as always, like all of our other online content, is available on Facebook, on our YouTube channel, and also on our church website at www.cleanemmanuel.com. So I will see you next time as we consider more of When God is Silent by Barbara Brown Taylor. Remember, God loves you, and so do I. Have a wonderful rest of your day.